It's really not surprising why billionaires like Howard Schultz are so terrified of progressives, because we had Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez propose a 70% marginal tax on income more than $10 million. We had Elizabeth Warren propose a 2 and 3% asset tax for millionaires and billionaires, respectively. And now we have news that Bernie Sanders is doing something that will definitely make them piss themselves. Now, according to Maxwell Sprachin and Emily Peck of HuffPost, Senator Bernie Sanders just proposed huge increases to the estate tax, which would reverse decades of cuts that have allowed the nation's richest to establish generations of wealth. Sanders wants to tax billionaires at a top rate of 77% when they die, a massive increase from the current rate. His Thursday announcement of what he's calling the For the 99.8% Act came just days after Republican senators announced they wanted to repeal the estate tax wholesale. Sanders said the bill would raise $2.2 trillion from the more than 500 people who are billionaires in the United States at a time when Democratic contenders for president seem to be in a race to one-up each other with new ways of getting the rich to pay their fair share. Sanders is expected to announce his candidacy for 2020 soon. Our bill does what the American people want by substantially increasing the estate tax on the wealthiest families in this country and dramatically reducing wealth inequality, Sanders said in a press release. From a moral, economic, and political perspective, our nation will not thrive when so few have so much and so many have so little. Republicans have railed against the estate tax for years, calling it the death tax. It was drastically lowered during the George W. Bush administration, even disappearing for a time in 2010 and cut again with the most recent GOP tax overhaul. On Monday, GOP Senators Mitch McConnell, Chuck Grassley, and John Thune introduced legislation that would go even further, permanently eliminating the federal estate tax altogether. Currently, assets worth more than $11.4 million are taxed at a maximum rate of 40%. As recently as 1976, the tax rate was 77% on assets of $10 million in today's dollars. Sanders would like to get back there. Under his plan, estates between $3.5 million and $10 million would be taxed at 45%. After that, the tax rate would increase to 50% for assets of $10 million to $50 million and to 55% for assets between $50 million and $1 billion. Any assets above that would be taxed at a rate of 77%. Sanders said the bill would affect the richest 0.2% of earners. Now, I just have to point out how clever this is, because what Bernie Sanders decided to call this bill is the For the 99.8% tax. This will guard this bill from any obfuscation that Republicans will inevitably try. Because think about this. Whenever they talk about the estate tax, or as they call it, the death tax, they make it seem as if, this is wealth that will be taxed, to just ordinary Joes and farmers, when in actuality, this is the richest people that this will affect. So by calling it the 99.8% Act, the For the 99.8% Act, he's making it explicitly clear, this doesn't apply to you, this doesn't apply to me, this applies to the ultra rich. So this is absolutely something that's needed, and I love how he's right there to counter the Republicans' measure to eliminate the estate tax, and he's also there to add another hurdle to Howard Schultz here's plan to keep all of his wealth and, be even more greedy. So when we see these different policy proposals from progressives, be it the asset tax from Elizabeth Warren or the marginal tax rate of income above $10 million from AOC, and now the increase of the estate tax from Bernie Sanders, these are all meant to work in tandem. We would benefit as a society if these were all passed simultaneously, or not necessarily simultaneously, but if they all existed at the same time. Because if you live in a country where people can become so filthy rich that they surpass $1 billion, then that speaks to the failure of our economic system, because normal human beings, they just don't need that much wealth. Think about this. If you had $1 billion and you went out and you bought a Ferrari, it wouldn't even register. You wouldn't even realize that you had just spent a significant sum of money. It's an amount of wealth that is inconceivable. And not only that, with money comes power. So as the amount of money that they have increases, so too does their level of power. And that poses a direct threat to democracy, because then these billionaires have the ability to self-fund their elections. And they make it so that way they don't have to compete and start at city council and work their way up to get elected. They can just buy their way into the race, which is a privilege nobody else in the country has. They don't just have to buy off puppets to write the rules for them. Now they can just fund their own elections, get in, and cut their own taxes. That's exactly what Donald Trump did. So you have people like Howard Schultz getting so brazen in their greed that he's literally running on not taxing the rich anymore. I mean, if you think that's going to resonate, then you're in for a really rude awakening, because the way that Donald Trump, even if he has the same intentions as Howard Schultz, the way that he was elected was by actually trying to speak to normal Americans. Now, he was lying. He was a faux populist, but nonetheless, he at least had the political intuition to acknowledge that you can't just run on, I'm representing the billionaires. But that's what these assholes are doing, and they're getting so shameless. But now, do we see Bernie Sanders backing down? No. He comes out and proposes another way of taking what rightfully belongs to the American people, their wealth, because you didn't earn $1 billion. Nobody can earn $1 billion. It's impossible to do so much work to earn $1 billion. One couldn't earn $1 billion in 10 lifetimes. So when I talk about seizing their wealth and seizing their assets, people retort by saying, well, that's a form of theft. How can you live in a democracy and support that type of policy position? And my response is, how could you not? Because them, quote, earning $1 billion is theft. Because if you're earning $1 billion, then capitalism has failed the people. That's theft. They exploited their workers to get that money. So with that being said, I absolutely support this, and I really like that progressives aren't backing down. You can really get a sense as to who the true progressives in the race are, because when these billionaires start to cry and whine about how oppressed they are by the peasants, that's the time when you pounce. That's what Elizabeth Warren is doing. That's what Bernie Sanders is doing. That's what AOC is doing. That's what I expect Tulsi to do. And it's something that we all need to do. Because the rich, for too long, have gone away with their greed. And now is the time when people are suffering and desperate, when they are susceptible to radicalization, when they are susceptible to being duped by a right-wing demagogue like Donald Trump. That's when you know they're starved. They're being deprived of resources these oligarchs took from them. So now it's just time that we take it back. Simple as that.
Subscribe if you like this video, folks. Mike's tremendous, and he's doing a really, really good job. Many people are telling me about how wonderful the Humanist Report is. Bigly.